morning, Tri-Cities. It's 9 o'clock on Friday, so it's time for Coffee with Karl. I'm Karl from Tridec, and we are excited today to have our guests join us and have a rousing discussion about real estate and housing, which, as we know, the Tri-Cities has changed a little bit over the years. First of all, I need to thank our sponsor of today's Coffee with Karl. That's Mike Miller from Moon Security. We just saw their video on there. Mike and his team in downtown Pasco do an amazing job offering many security solutions from residential, as you saw, to business, even fire protection and other things. So if you have any concerns about security, go see Mike Miller, downtown Pasco at Moon Security. Thanks, Mike. Okay, I am going to go in no particular order and introduce our guests today. I'm going to start with Ken Poletsky. He's the Government Affairs Committee Chair and Community Real Estate Group for Keller Williams Tri-Cities. Good morning, Ken. Thanks for joining us at the last minute. I know we had a last minute change, but we appreciate your time this morning.
Good morning, Karl. Good to be here. And excited to talk and hear what's going on.
That's awesome. And Ken, your video just went off. But we'll get right back to you. Next up is Melissa Montgomery. She's the board president at Tri-City Association of Realtors. She's also a realtor at RE/MAX. Good morning, Melissa. Oh, and you're on mute. It wouldn't be a Zoom call if we didn't have somebody on mute, right?
I am. Oh, not on mute. Thank you, Karl, for the invitation to come and talk houses.
You bet. Thanks for joining us. Last but not least, our old friend, not old, but just our friend, Jeff Losey. Jeff's the executive director of our local chapter of the Home Builders Association. Good morning, Jeff.
Hey, good morning, Karl. Thank you very much for having me. And yeah, well, I'm older than I was yesterday, so you're right. Well,
aren't we all? All right, let's start off with our mugs. I just got a new mug this week, and it is from, if you can see that, from the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. Come on, baby. Obviously the Fed just met this week, kept interest rates the same, but we have a great lady and her team over in Seattle, Christina Perk, who is the new, I think she's like area president of the Seattle branch for the Fed. But she comes out periodically. Her predecessor came out as well, and we meet with them and we just kind of talk about the economy. I think all that information kind of, flows up into each regional office, like the San Francisco Fed, and then they all get together to make the determination on how's the economy doing and all the other things when they set interest rates. So she complimented us on Coffee with Karl. She gave me that mug, and we're happy to plug what they do, and we're happy to be connected because I think, real estate's a great example of how maybe the Tri-Cities has sort of caught up with other parts of the country, obviously the west side of our state and others in real estate pricing. But then also our economy, I think, is pretty unique because we got this blend and diversity out there. So appreciate the mug, and that's my mug story. Melissa, what do you have for us for a mug this morning?
Well, it is a not generic, it's a tea mug because I'm not a big coffee drinker. I'm a big tea drinker, but the magic of my mug is over here. And it's this little thing that's a tea strainer and a thing. So I put my creamed Earl Grey into here, put this in there, and then pour my water on it, steep it, then I pull it all out, and I have my magic juice.
Wow.
And a girlfriend gave me this because she knows I love the mountains. I don't know if you can see it, but there's actually mountains in
yeah. That's cool. Wow. It looks like a nice mug too. It probably feels really good in your hand.
It does.
Yeah.
With a wood handle.
Oh, wood. Ooh, that is nice. Ken, how about you? What do you have for a mug or a mug story for us this morning?
Well, my mug is kind of a memory mug. It's got my kids on that. It's when we're
Can you put
hunting.
it kind of a little bit more in front of you? Your background's yeah, there we go. Oh yeah, it's got the whole fam.
Yeah. So this is a mug that my wife made for me, and I pulled it out of the cupboard this morning for this. And it's a memory mug too, because it's got our hunting memories and things that we do here. In a couple months, we'll be going as a family up into the mountains, and just a time for my grown kids and I to get together because they're all grown up now. So
yeah,
kind of a fun little deal, just a little memory thing. So
yeah, where do you guys go to the mountains?
we go up in Idaho. We've been going there for about 40 years. My dad started taking me up there when I was doing high school math. and we've been able to stay in the same area and just take family back and forth. So it's been fun.
It's awesome. I have to ask because I'm from Idaho, so it's a pretty big state. Where do you go?
Well, it's a real secret spot.
Oh, okay.
No, no, I'll share. So, the Highway 95 corridor through the Salmon River, right through there.
Yep.
That is that's really steep country. That's where we
Yep.
hunt. So,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Jeff, how about you? What do you got for a mug for us?
My mug today, with deference to Tracy, because yes, I do have a spectacular mug, but I didn't want to be self-deprecating on here and like show my own self on here, which is the major reason why that mug is not on display. However, I feel compelled to bring it out at another time. But today, I've got for those that don't know, Opportunity Happens Here, which is the Port of Benton.
All right.
And, I have a lot of things to be thankful about the Port of Benton. One of those is my fiance, who is out at the Port of Benton. And, and I have had the opportunity to learn a lot more about the Port of Benton in her short time there. But, I've known Diane for years, but the opportunities that abound and the economic opportunities that the Port of Benton has done for Tri-Cities clearly goes unmatched. And I would also suggest to anybody that hasn't done it, the USS Triton Sail Park that's out there right across the street from it. If you ever have the opportunity, gosh, Summer does a great tour out there, and it is amazing. One of the great gems that we have in Tri-Cities.
That's really well said. And of course, Port of Benton's critical partner, our economic development partner, in so many different ways. And there's such a group of leaders out there. That's a perfect mug, even beyond your fiance. That's awesome.
Yes, like I said, I'm very invested in the port.
Well said. So for those of you joining us on the Zoom webinar, if you have any questions as we go through our discussion today, you can always use the question and answer feature down at the bottom. If you're joining us on social media, you can use the comment feature, and we'll be monitoring social media. And so we'll do our best to get those into our conversation. But thanks everybody for joining us this morning. Well, let's start off with kind of the first step of homes and home ownership, and that's construction. Jeff, do you want to just maybe give us a general update on trends, or what do you see happening in the home building market, and how's it going?
Yeah. So from the beginning of the year to where we are today, things are starting to change, and they would change in the amount of activity that the builders are getting. At the beginning of the year, most of the builders that were active would have told you that the phones weren't ringing, they weren't getting the calls, and it was really difficult to make things happen at the end of 23. And we, for those that hadn't seen my economic report earlier, we were down 26% in new single family permits year over year from 2022 to 2023. And that being said, up through July of this year, we're up 22% in new single family permits being pulled. So, not just the builders telling me that their phones have been ringing and the first quarter of this year, that clearly has continued, which has also kind of buoyed the spirits of those that are in the general construction. And so, the only, there's many things that hold back the construction industry, and one of those is interest rates, as everybody knows. You can't outrun them, and they are what they are. And it definitely casts a mood over those wanting to purchase. So those of us that, as you so poignantly pointed out earlier, Karl, that we've been around a while, remember the days of 8% and 7% used to be the norm. But the millennials and those that are of the buying age and those that are the next purchasers of homes, they like that 2 and 3%. And so where we're at now has been hard for everybody to swallow. So even the news coming out that it looks like interest rates are going to quail a little bit more for us as we get into the last quarter of 24, it's kind of following the long run predictions of our national economist, who was saying they expected a rough 2024, and we've shown that. but I think it's also indicative of we're up 22%. And the latest numbers that I saw for median homes for days on the market, those numbers keep going down. The number of homes that are just listed as a total, that number is still below 800. It's not where we would like it to be, which just means that 2025 through 2030, the prediction is, whether it's Tri-Cities or across the board, there's going to be a big run and a big push for single family residences across the board. The interest rates are clearly going to help lead the way with that. And then, of course, the Achilles heel with all of that is labor lots and that demand, which is going to cut into that inventory again, which could be the biggest challenge that we have going forward.
Being lots, ultimately, you're saying just like buildable acreage lots with infrastructure and ready to go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, that's great. That kind of tees up I think the rest of our conversation. Maybe we'll go to Melissa from the real estate side. I mean, Jeff gave some really good information there, one of which being how many just houses are on the market. I think he said like 800, but from just a, buying and selling a real estate perspective, Melissa, what are you guys seeing as far as trends, say, compared to last year, or, where do you see the real estate market going here in the Tri-Cities?
Well, first, we're shy of it. We've just got about 3 months of inventory, and a healthy market is about 6 months of inventory. So it's still a little bit of a seller's market, even though the interest rate, going back to what Jeff said, I'm old also. My first house when I bought it was 15.3% in 1983.
Wow.
So I've been happy with anything since then. Hopefully we'll never ever see those numbers again. But as you said, interest rates are affecting the buyers more so. We've had a big shift in our local, the antitrust lawsuit that happened. This is a new change that happened, and buyers agents commissions are no longer being marketed. And so we had a big change as of yesterday in our MLS on how things are going to move forward. It's still going to be the same, but that buyer's agent's going to have to negotiate its commission versus being told what they're going to be paid, put it that way.
Okay.
But the housing market, it's still moving along. People move for the same reasons they always have. They get divorced, they get unable to live in their home, they get relocated from those jobs. Those things are still happening even with the interest rate.
Thank you. A couple of years ago, it might have even been like the end of COVID. I don't even remember which local real estate office had it, but they invited me to go to like a real estate economist who was from Seattle. I want to say he maybe ran the UW. They've got like a college of real estate, I think. And a point that he made, I think about, which is when interest rates were so low, somebody could afford a lot more house than they could normally afford, based on their income. It's kind of like a sliding scale, obviously, with interest rates affects your payment. That's like how much you can afford. And, I wonder about that in the housing stock, both from a construction standpoint and then maybe the houses that are available, because interest rates were low for, 10 years or something like that. I mean, we had really low interest rates. And maybe this is a question for Jeff, but you guys from the real estate side too, did that trend push us towards, say, like a bigger house or a nicer house or more bedrooms or more amenities that now the kind of the building community is set up to build this house that with higher interest rates, like, do we need a different product because of affordability? Like, is it a sliding scale? Or, Jeff, you're nodding your head. Am I making sense with my question?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could probably all answer that question, Ken and Melissa, but that is one of the key factors, is size and affordability. And so the national trend has been shrinking square foot because of what you just said. Because the one thing from all the studies that have been put out by the National Association of Home Builders, nobody wants to give up on amenities. So they want granite. They want the nice floors. They want a very nice house, but they'll take it in a more compact space to try to keep that same monthly payment and keep the price of the house down. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It's like something has to give, right? Which is why townhomes and those units that can use up less lots and put more units on them and you can get them at a better price as a consumer. That's why those are more appealing right now. And one of the things that is blowing up in Tri-Cities, because it's affordability issue, but you can still have the nice features that you want in what used to be in a 3,000 square foot house, you can now get in a 2,000 to 1,500 square foot house.
Yeah.
With the same price.
And if it's townhome, then like you're saying, because it's on the same lot, so you just have kind of your dirt cost in the equation for your living space,
which are very expensive at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. We saw a lot of builders switching to the smaller product, probably towards the, the end of last year, 2023, right? And it ran through because they had to make a big pivot, right? I mean, the 2,500 and up square footage plans weren't selling at the price that they needed them to sell for. And the affordability part of it was taking effect because of the interest rates, right? I mean, it's all driven from that.
Yeah.
And so we're starting to see at least our builders that has shifted into that, like Jeff said, that 1,500 square foot plan. The product moved, and that will be probably more of the same for the next quarter, maybe two, until the rates do adjust.
Well, there were buyers in 71 when the interest rate was 7 and something, waiting for it to drop, and kept waiting for it to drop, and it never dropped until 93. And in that time frame, the house price quadrupled. So buyers right now just have to get used to this new price, because as Jeff was saying, in 25 to 2030, when the house is going to be, there's going to be multiple offers and so forth again, which they need to buy when they can afford to buy.
Yeah. All right. Ken, let's go to you next. From your role with the Association of Realtors on the government affairs side, what are some maybe statewide policy issues you guys are working on or concerned about, or from that government affairs perspective, what are some trends or hot topics you guys are working on now?
Yeah, so some of the I guess there's some wins and loses in every year cycle, right? When legislation meets and decides the fate of the state, if you will. But there were some good things out of the last couple this last session especially, but the middle housing bill is going to be a big issue that's going to hit the Tri-Cities and have an impact and maybe a little blowback too, because it's going to open up opportunities for housing that we have not seen before, because of traditional zoning has been a single family home neighborhood, has been a single family home neighborhood, and it would be for in perpetuity, right? Just will sit like that. The middle housing bill that's coming now, as developers develop a single family neighborhood, may have a little diversity with some duplexes or even up to a fourplex, depending on the city's population. And we see that as a win. And I hope most home owners or people that own in areas see it as a win too, because overall it's going to add inventory to our market. And when we add inventory, which Melissa pointed out, with only having 3 months supply, when that gets up into 6 months, the prices soften a little bit, right? Because the sellers are now competing in things like that. And we always need the introductory starter, moving from the mom and dad's house into the apartment, right? And then from the apartment into, maybe we're seeing more and more of the townhouses or the ADU type units that can happen. So that was a big win. There's some things that we did not win outside of the scope of city jurisdiction, which is, accessory dwelling units in some of the counties and stuff. Luckily around here, we're pretty lax, but across the state, it didn't pass overall as a statewide law. That middle housing is going to be a big piece. Now, Kennewick has really embraced it. So is Pasco, right? They're already in the forefront of writing new standards and codes into their design standards in the city, already allowing some of the uses to be implemented. And I'll be honest, I've been to several of the meetings with their planners, that the planners are actually even coaching or being, service providers to the consumer who's coming in and saying, what can I do with my lot? Well, you can do this now, but then you have an option when the middle housing comes in summer of 2025, which will be implemented in Kennewick there. And then you'll have this option. Maybe it's a fourplex versus just 2 or 3 units that'll be available, because that's going to have a direct impact. Another couple big wins that were, the rent control was shot down, right? And that was a big win, because if we all noticed our taxes over the last 2 years, Franklin County got hit in 2022, and then 2023, Benton County got hit with major assessment tax on assessments on their homes. So um, those types of things are kind of what's happening. And when you do that and you have rent control and you can't raise rents, all of a sudden you're having a negative out, income coming in. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting thing to watch, and being part of governmental affairs through the board of realtors and at the state level just gives us a voice, and we try to take the voice of our consumer clients and our industry, our developers, our builders, our homeowners, our tenants, and take that up to the hill and have a voice. So that's
Yeah.
kind of what's been going on. That's just a few.
No, that's great. And obviously you guys are very effective at the state level, and it's great that you can represent your association that way. I have to ask you, which city do you love? It looks like you might be sitting in Panama City, but
Oh,
do you have a
well,
specific
our
city you
church
love more,
did it.
Jeff? Or Ken?
Our church New Vintage, we just did a big citywide. It wasn't
Oh,
one city, but I love the Tri-Cities.
there you go.
There you go. So is that the right call?
That
I know
is.
where you're at. Yeah. Yeah.
No, yeah, you mentioned the middle housing, and I know Tracy put it up in the chat for anybody that's interested in that. But and Jeff, you'd brought it up before, as I guess I wasn't aware of it, but it sounds like the city of Kennewick is doing a survey regarding middle housing. So is that something that they want to kind of get the population or the citizens to weigh in on, to sort of determine as like a zoning change or a comprehensive plan change or something? Or does
Yeah.
anybody want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, it's a comprehensive plan update that all
Okay.
of the cities are required to do.
Ah,
And they're in the midst of updating their comprehensive plan. And they did speed it up a little bit for the middle housing bill, and the bill that came through, it's requiring them to allow more multifamily opportunities. And I think, just like anything, there isn't a jurisdiction that wants to be legislated from Olympia said, this is what you're going to do.
yeah.
So this is the city of Kennewick trying to be proactive and say, well, let's get the citizens, let's get their thoughts on what they would like to see and how they would like this to be approached. Because at the end of the day, we had some conversations before the chat started, and I think depends on what study you look at, but I've seen studies from Metro Portland that talk about these types of activities where you create, whether it's a fourplex, a sixplex, an eightplex in the middle of a single family residential neighborhood. Everybody loves it until it's right next to them.
Yeah.
So then you're in this housing development that you thought was single family residential, and then all of a sudden it's not. And then, people's response is, well, I didn't sign up for that. But at the end of the day, the legislature is saying, this is what you're going to do to the jurisdictions. So this is why the city of Kennewick is doing this. And I think it's them being a good steward of the resources that they have. But, in this case, they don't have a choice. And so they have to figure out a way to make it work. And they just want to make sure that they're getting everybody's opinion, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah.
And Karl, I think this just also leads into in talking about, because as we talk about affordability, one of the words that we continue to use in the building industry is just attainability. And attainability for housing is becoming less and less attainable for most of the people that live in Tri-Cities. And so in Benton County right now, the median income is $83,000. The median home sales price is $429,000.
Yeah.
And right now in Benton County, 78% of the residents can't afford a conventional mortgage, and 21% can't afford an FHA loan, which is only 3% down.
Wow.
And in Franklin County, they're close, but the median income is 77. And then those that can't afford a conventional loan in Franklin County is 77%. And then 22% can't afford the FHA. So those are pretty big numbers for folks that can't afford to get in. And so although the legislator is mandating And Ken had mentioned too that the city of Pasco had already been out in front of some of these development standards and design changes. And I think it's imperative because of the Growth Management Act, which basically draws a line around each one of the cities and creates a scarcity of land. I mean, the tenet of the GMA is supposed to promote and affect affordable housing. Well, it has by making it less affordable.
Yeah.
But here we are over 30 years later, still talking about it. Why is housing continuing to escalate the way it is? And there's 4 states left in the union that still plan under GMA, and we're one of them.
Yeah.
So it's just, it's death by 1,000 cuts. Washington State keeps doing it to itself, and housing is more affordable, and it starts at the ground.
So I'm almost worried to wade into this one, but I think it was last year. We went to a meeting. We're an associate development organization, so that means we have a contract with Department of Commerce, and Department of Commerce in our state has like 12 different divisions, and I think housing is actually one of them, or I might be describing it wrong, but we went to this meeting and we talked about issues that affect like what we think of as traditional economic development, like the stuff we do, industrial recruiting, bringing companies in, and partnering with Port Benton, Port Pasco, Port Kennewick, and our municipal partners to help facilitate bringing in big companies that their workforce is at or slightly above that median income. And housing is such an issue for that workforce. Like for us to continue to grow, have the growth pattern that we have to have this workforce housing sector. But anyway, at this meeting, we talked about the Growth Management Act, and we brought up the fact that it hasn't really been altered since it was implemented years ago. And so this guy from the housing area said, like, well, we just did a legislative report a couple of years ago and we analyzed that and everything was okay. And I'm simplifying his answer, but I was taken aback a bit, and to your point, Jeff, and like, okay, maybe they've analyzed it, but like, I don't understand why when they do this analysis or this report, like they can't understand that land scarcity, infrastructure scarcity has a big impact on pricing. And that relates to GMA, and it seems like to be reasonable that it would make sense maybe for the legislature to open it up and have a discussion about it. So maybe I'm just throwing you a softball, but I think it's because it does have an effect to your point on housing prices, and our growth model in the Tri-Cities is kind of the antithesis, I think, of what GMA is supposed to do. Like everybody hates, or it's supposed to be against urban sprawl, but the reality of it is in our community, if you can move the irrigation, from the pivot that you're going to start building houses on the next place out, and you've still got the water, relatively, the ground's still going to be just as productive. Like you can move the ag out to the edge of the urban area in our community, and at supply and demand of land, right?
No, and I think, all of that being said, you don't have to be an economist to understand scarcity.
Yeah.
And the GMA caused that. And not only did it cause a scarcity of land instantly for those that were inside of the GMA, because the assumption is for some of these towns, even like Walla Walla, that's part of our territory here, that they assume that all of the land that's inside of the UGA is buildable.
Sure.
Well, you have to have a willing seller
Yeah.
to want to sell that land to consider it buildable lands, but that's not the way it's viewed. And I guess the more frustrating part is that any appeal by the counties to expand their boundary, like Franklin County has had to do, has to go to the Eastern Washington Growth Hearings Board, which are all appointed individuals, not elected, and they're only beholden to the governor. And a lot of the time, the money, the delays, and the other thing that was most frustrating these last few years was a bill that allowed the school districts to purchase land and site outside the UGA. Now, we as a pro-business, small business supporter, we don't have a problem because we all pay and ascribe to the levies and the bonds that support the schools. The problem with it is the reason the schools want to site outside the UGA is because the land's cheaper.
Sure.
But they won't let private out. And so we fought them on that one and clearly lost. But for the same merits that the school districts went out of the UGA, and I think there isn't a jurisdiction that you're going to run into that wouldn't that the sprawl that spoke about what we're trying to avoid. I mean, you go out to Cottonwood in Badger Mountain, those are all wells and septics and very large lots. And so those schools that have to go on wells and septics are not good.
Yeah.
So it's better if all of those are connected to city services, so that way you can manage the flow. Because I remember sitting in the Department of Ecology meeting and about the number of wells that are drilled that affect the Yakima confluence, and it makes a big effect on all those second tier water right holders, which is every one of those residences out there. And they don't understand that they could get their wells shut off because they're not first rights.
Sure.
And all of those things being said, I think the cities, if you allow them to manage the growth and they're going to build in the way that they would prefer to go and connect to those city services, builders and developers are going to build where it's the least path of resistance and the least cost to have the best product that they can put out there. And all that being said, they're not going to go to an area that's more expensive if it's out in the middle of nowhere,
Sure.
hoping somebody comes. But if you can provide those city services, so I mean, there's the tenets of the GMA, they just kind of get glossed over as it's a great tool and it keeps us from sprawling.
Yeah.
And I would submit that what we're doing right now is more problematic, because how are you going to expand a boundary when you have these other pockets that keep tapping into the groundwater and wells that they're not monitored. They're supposed to only use this many gallons per year, but it all is going to become a real big issue as we do continue to grow.
Yeah. Ken, is growth management, is that on kind of your list of issues or topics for
It's a
government
issue.
affairs?
It's an issue that we've been opposed to and like to have repealed. I mean, right?
Yeah.
Just by what Jeff's saying, because when we're talking about affordability and being constrained into a geographical area of boundary, and then opposed at every opposition with environmental groups and such, if we did propose an expansion, because the state actually kind of dictates on what our projected growth is going to be. So then we have to meet that growth criteria. And it would be wonderful just to see it completely repealed and we get away from it, let the cities handle their own growth pattern. Because clearly with what we're seeing, the new legislation enacted by legislation that's with the middle housing, they're capable of coming up with solutions, right? They're putting out surveys to the citizens and finding out information that's needed or what the citizens would want and designing to that. So yes, it's definitely, but it's one of those I guess walls that's hard to break through. And maybe clearly impossible. I mean, but Jeff's point on the wells, bringing that up in that fashion, because that water issue is a big issue, right? I mean, in some of the counties, they're already putting monitoring systems in and only allowing you to water 4,000 square feet on your 5-acre parcel if you don't have irrigation. And that's basically a fire break around your house. That's nothing more. That's not lawn, right? Those types of things. But yeah.
No, that's I just think it's a factor, right, that affects our real estate market. That, I mean, we all have to live somewhere, so it's something that we all deal with to a degree.
Well, it would take our county, our county commissioners would have to, draw a line and say, we're going to pull out and it's going to be a battle and there's lawsuits and lots of money and things that would happen. But if they're, if they want to make a stance, that's where it has to start.
Yeah. Melissa, I wanted to go to you and maybe go back to some of the information that Jeff was sharing, that somewhere in the 70% of like Benton and Franklin County of the people that live there based on median income can't afford the median household. Do you see, like, from a real estate sales side that that like there's more houses being sold at certain price points, like that median's 429, but like if this bigger, more than half of the population can't afford the average house, and obviously there are these other housing options. You can rent an apartment, you can, people have at least choices where they live. But do you guys have any data, or do you look at that like on the houses that sell, I don't know, big, medium, small, whatever the size categories are, the price points that that kind of show that same challenge in that, or maybe there aren't as many houses on the market that are kind of more of that first home, first rung on the housing ladder, if you will.
Well, the first rung on the housing ladder, that price point is so high that the first home buyer can't afford to buy it. And
Yeah.
it's just because the cost to build it is so
Yeah.
much. We need some really inexpensive first-time home buyers, because that's what flows the market from the first buyer, and then they buy, build up, build up. I've been involved in real estate since '91, and I've never seen, typically the houses, the $400,000-$500,000 house is someone retiring into a very nice, smaller, one-level home.
Sure.
First-time homebuyer houses right now are hitting 350 to 400, which is just a crazy market. I don't have statistics that says the age or the income of the people that buy the houses, because that would be interesting
Sure.
to follow. I don't know how we could ever do that with what is in our multiple listings service. I know with my clients, I have a lot fewer first-time home buyers now than I've had in years.
Okay. Well, and I guess the part of kind of the housing market, if you will, and the construction market that we don't have on today is mortgages, right? Like I gotta assume it's going to be really tough with mortgages. We met with a title company not too long ago, and he said, obviously mortgages and title transfers, insurance is way down because like there just isn't the volume that normally you'd see because interest rates are high, and in mortgages, at least there's generally a fair amount of business and refinances and stuff like that they just don't see that traction. So, I mean, from a realtor standpoint, do you see variability in like how many realtors are out there? I mean, like the interest rates or construction rates stuff affect how many realtors are on the market? Do you guys track that at all through the Association of Realtors?
And it continues to grow. We're roughly
Okay.
1,180 agents on the market, which is
Yeah.
up from last month. They continue to come as realtors because
Okay.
it is a great profession to help people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, there's more agents coming into the market, whether they'll stay. I think Ken is an 80% failure rate in real estate in the first few years of agents. You come into it for a couple of years and you get out of it because it's a difficult business to make a long-term living in unless you're committed to it full time.
I was thinking about that the other day. It used to be a job, then it became a career. Now it's kind of a calling, right, Melissa?
Yeah. True.
Now those who serve, and we serve people. That's what we do.
Yeah.
We figure out solutions and help them, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, but there are, Karl, excuse me, there are a lot of agents that are licensed that don't actively sell. And this is just my guess, of the 1,200 agents, there's probably only maybe 200 of them that are actively selling and making a living at it.
Yeah.
And not being supplemented by another job. But then you have agents that keep it because they're a part-time agent and their husband has a full-time job with benefits, and they like to sell it to their cousins, brothers, dogs, wife, every other year, because you have that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah. Well, I guess associated question with the change, like you brought up the antitrust lawsuit, and now that's sounds like an effect through the multiple listing services. But do you guys predict that the change in that law will, I don't want to say push more people out of being a realtor, because I don't know if if the commission would go down. I mean, obviously, I think that's kind of what the lawsuit generally talked about. But what are your predictions on that? Will it affect the number of realtors out there, or like what kind of change will it cause?
My personal opinion, I think we're going to lose some agents that don't know how to negotiate. Because that buyer's agent is now going to have to negotiate his or her commission, her compensation. Yeah. And if they can't negotiate that, how can they negotiate the sale of the house? So those are naturally going to be attrition that fall off, which is a good thing. You want someone that's going to be able to say their value. On the statewide level, correct me, Ken, if I'm wrong with this, I think the state budget predicted a 20% drop of agents across the state. Was their prediction. I don't know if we're just in a new world, an uncharted territory now that's never happened.
Yeah.
And change is good. We're embracing it. It's just going to move forward.
Yeah, because statistically, they're only closing, maybe average is closing 4 deals a year. You can't survive on 4 deals a year, like Melissa pointed out.
Yeah.
And with agents that can't negotiate or get the message across, they will not be able to, get into an agency agreement which is a requirement as of January this year. And we've been practicing it for years, but requirements that we have to be in a buyer agency agreement before we can provide services. And you have to have that conversation about how you get paid and what that commission or compensation is going to be. Those agents are going to probably clearly drop out. 20%, is 10% is probably on the normal anyway, because people retire, get out of the business, fail, and move on. And
Yeah.
that's a normal attrition. And then people jump in, which we see a lot of brand new agents getting in the business. And you look at them and go, wow, you don't have to learn a new script, where me and Melissa have had to learn a little bit of a new way to present the same situation, but just in a different context.
Yeah.
So it's been interesting challenge. It's been a little bit of public, like, slinging, almost frivolous lawsuit type scenario. We're going scratching our head going, what the heck happened? I've been practicing the right way for years, and now you're trying to make me clearly say it a different way. So that doesn't make sense. So it's been interesting. It's a roller
Yeah.
coaster, but all these new agents just get the new script.
Gotcha.
Which the new forms are very transparent. It's good, but
Yeah.
it's completely transparent where it needed to be. But Washington State's the first state that demanded we make the change. Well, the change had to happen by August 17th of this year. We started our change January 1st this year on buyer's agency.
Okay. I just think that, to your point, I would imagine being a realtor, and I know, some really, really good ones, it's a trust thing, right? I mean, the home buyer doesn't understand all the laws, all the things around selling and negotiating the price, and then the inspections and the financing and the mortgage and the title insurance and all these things. I mean, you need that realtor that understands those things. It's a professional to kind of help you navigate that. And I think, to your point, that it's a relationship and it's a trust thing that, you guys do a really good job of. And it's like any other profession that, the market selects people that are really good at it and rewards them. And that's kind of the way my opinion, I think the way that it should work. Jeff, I haven't heard you talk about the change in the energy code, but I wonder about that as I shift gears back into, thinking about ways that we can collectively work, whether it's through Olympia or with local ordinances, to try to, what are some other options in reducing that price point for that. I think the first step on the housing ladder, right? Because I think that, like, even if you have a place to live, but you're not buying into it over time, I mean, that's part of what we've all assumed, and it's kind of become maybe part of the American dream. The home ownership is kind of a thing that we take for granted, or previous generations, I'll say, have taken for granted. But is energy code still driving, part of that price point, the change in the energy code that builders have to do for new housing now, Jeff? And I just wonder, you're always good with statistics, but, like, the energy code, how much does it increase the price of that new home? And then I assume that there are energy savings, but where, like, our electricity prices are so low, do you ever recoup it? I mean, what do you think?
Well, Carl, I swear you're reading my notes, because you keep teeing these up, because I was not going to get off this without mentioning the energy code. And I'm like looking at the time and I'm like, ooh, it's going to be the next thing we talk about. So no, you're 100% right. And at the end of the day, we lost the battle over the energy code in 2010. So in 2010 is when we started the march towards a net zero home by 2030, and that's where we're headed. And a net zero home means that home does not take any more power than it generates off of the grid. That's the goal. We've asked for what you're talking about in many different instances, whether it's the water heater or any new changes in energy efficiency. Like, what is the payback? And at the end of the day, Carl, it's like the houses, Washington, Oregon, California, like, our energy code far surpasses the rest of the lower 48. And you're right. I mean, I am not apologetic for having low power rates. That's one of
No,
the
it's
reasons to live here, right?
yeah,
So that being said, it's that when we challenged about the fiscal responsibility and what is the payoff for that, that actually got stricken from the language years ago. That's not one of the arguments that we can make about
no,
it. It doesn't financially make sense, and so throw all that out the window. And we're on the path towards a net zero home. And at the end of the day, like Washington State, as you talk to anybody that's not from Washington State, that's from the East Coast, they think Seattle, they think trees, they don't think desert. And
right,
so every climate does not support a net zero home the same way.
yeah,
When you're coastal and you have more moderate swings in the temperature,
yeah,
it's a much different story than you are on the east side where we live when you go from 110 to 10 below in the
yeah,
same season. And so, but that's where we're headed. We lost it, in 2010, and we are on the pathway. And the cost, Carl, it depends on the change. Two energy cycle codes ago, it was anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000 additional cost on the home, and that was with one energy code change.
okay,
But we're getting to the point that like there's only so much more that you can squeeze out of these homes
yeah,
and get any more energy efficiency. And some of those costs to get there, like with the heat pumps that can run below 32 degrees,
right,
I've heard anywhere from additional $5,000 to $10,000 per unit for a heat pump that will run below 32 degrees.
yeah,
And those are the type of things that's it's like, well, that's what we got to do because that's what's in the code, and because there's nowhere else to get codes. And now anything that had gas is not included. It's going to
yeah,
be a detriment to use. So now everything's getting electrified. And so the hope is that we can keep the Snake River dams and to keep that power, because we're on this pathway towards everything being powered by electricity. And as we all talk about, and I know Karl, you're in those circles about baseload, that once we lose that, even all of these homes that we're talking about and the cost, and the energy savings are definitely there. I
yeah,
mean, no, the homes definitely benefit from it. But at the end of the day, if you can't turn something on at 3 o'clock or 5 o'clock, like you're used to doing, because you have to conserve because there's not enough power coming into the grid,
yeah,
and it's just going to be problematic. But yeah, those costs are real, and it's in the tens of thousands of dollars that have added up every 3 years as we spin into these. And some of those changes were significant, but as we get here towards the end, I mean, solar isn't mandated, but at the end of the day, if you're not doing it, it is harder to get your credits if you're not putting solar panels on there.
yeah. And I think the challenge with solar is it's such a long payback because our electricity is so cheap, right? Like, okay, you're not paying for your power because the meter kind of technically spinning backwards, but when your power is already compared to the rest of the country, some of the cheapest around, the payback, do you really hit that payback versus a California, right? Where I think that their rates are like, I mean, where we pay, 6 or 7 cents kilowatt, they're paying 14, 21, even a lot higher because I think they have demand pricing. So when everybody's got their AC on, I think they're paying a lot. So yeah, it's just, I think just like we've all talked about, even statewide, when you implement something, whether it's Growth Management Act or the Energy Code or something like that, where we've got different temperatures and different soils and different, all these variabilities, and it's really hard to do something, then let alone nationwide, because we all pay different rates of power. We all have different power generations. That those blanket policies have some gaps in them. I think it's pretty fair to say.
Yeah, no, there are, and
Yeah.
and also to just back up that point. So the latest study that we have shows that 25% of the cost of a new home is tied up in regulatory fees.
Wow.
So if you've got a $400,000 home, $100,000 of that is regulatory cost. That's not land, that's not building, that's not labor. That's just the regulatory costs that have to be dealt with. And so it's a real number.
Yeah.
And it's not getting better, easier. Yeah, the interest rates help, but at the end of the day, that's why you're still going to see a shrinking square footage, because people don't want to give up on amenities, which is
Yeah.
understandable. But to get that, you got to shrink the size to be able to squeeze it into a number that more
Yeah.
people can afford, and that's getting more difficult.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
that's
that's one of the things our builders have been doing, because a lot of them, if the code changed for anything under 1,500 square foot, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but they can moderate that code a little bit differently, so that code, they have to get 5 points on that, and the larger homes, they have to get 8. So they're finding ways to keep the affordability lower by doing the smaller house, which is nice. It did still increase, according to the builders we're working with. It was still about a $10,000 increase in some of their stuff that they had to do, and cost wise. One of the builders is embracing the solar idea, meaning that is something that is tangible, a benefit to the home buyer, right? In the future, that they have something to offset the power bill a little bit, even though the code only requires a small system to get the point. So it's not going to give them 100% of that power bill, but it is giving them something. And I'm just thrilled with the ideas that I'm hearing from some of the home builders, that Jeff works with and stuff, that these guys have come up with some pretty good solutions, and all in an effort to keep price down, right, and hit the code, which is a requirement.
yeah.
Remember the day we used to have green built homes? I mean, you got to really, if you got a green built home, it was like, wow, you spent that extra money to get, a little bit of savings. Now that code is surpassed by a long shot, right? I mean, with what we're doing today, it's just insane, which impacts obviously price and the consumer. But it
Yeah.
is interesting, and I think that solar option, yeah, it's not going to cover the whole thing, and we do have the lower pieces, but compared to the extra insulation on the exterior wall,
Yeah.
as a piece of that is something to be thought through, and they're doing a
That,
good job. Our builders here locally, I think, do a
yeah.
fabulous job trying to figure that out.
That's a good point. To your point about the code, that you get so many points for what you do, insulation versus a solar panel or something. I mean, maybe the equation on a solar panel makes more sense in that it saves you costs in other areas to meet the code. It doesn't necessarily mean that your payback's any quicker, but it might at least keep the price of your new house even, and make up some
Offset that a
other.
little bit, right? That's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
hope. Yeah.
That's a good point. We got about 5 minutes left. I mean, maybe just to end up on this, because again, in economic development, what we are, I would just say, most interested in is that workforce housing, right? Like when we work on a Dairy Gold project or a Pasco, or we got Atlas Agro coming up, Framingham, ATI, and Richland are adding jobs. We're hopeful that we'll be able to land an industrial location in Kennewick now that they've got their industrial land through the GMA appeal process. We wonder about like the people that are going to work in these factories, right? Which are these great working class blue collar jobs that provide good incomes. Where are they going to live? Are there other solutions in other part of the countries where there's a different type of housing stock, right? That we're not considering, or that we don't, for whatever reason, it's not part of our, kind of like palette, if you will, of types of housing we're doing. And I bring that up because we go every year with all of our local governments to the kind of this retail trade show down in Las Vegas. And we met a developer out of Seattle, and he was saying he owns a modular home building company in Boise, and he says some, affordable housing, workforce housing solutions. So like things that are built in a factory and then assembled on site that might lower the costs. I don't know, but like, is that an example of a something we should consider as a community? Or do you guys have any ideas or things that you're thinking about? I think the middle housing sounds like you guys are on board with that, and maybe it gives us more options. But is there anything else we should be thinking about for that workforce housing from a community standpoint?
Well, I mean, modular housing works if you're close to the source, and that's the problem
Okay.
in Tri-Cities. Like, are
Yeah.
there builders that have explored it? Yep. Problem is, if you don't have the factory here, the expense that you get by getting it here, there's
Yeah.
SIPS panels that you can get that are preformed, and you just set them up and you set the walls up. But it's just the cost to do that here. It doesn't make a lot of financial sense, Carl. So it's not the least expensive way to approach it in Tri-Cities. And, you know, and at the end of the day, I think a lot of those larger cities that have some of those different opportunities also have a different infrastructure to handle and move bodies. And ours is all by you get in a car and you go somewhere.
Right.
Which is why the GMA is the crippler for
Yeah.
a lot of these opportunities that are out there, just because it makes it more difficult to build in some of the areas. You know, Amazon all the way out in the farthest southeast area of Pasco, and either you're going to go into Burbank, which everything's on a well and a septic. Well, they do have some city water there, but there's everything septic out there. And so GMA, Karl, the GMA, we just need help beating that thing back.
Yeah. It's a good point. Melissa or Ken, anything else to add on workforce housing, affordable housing? Any ideas or any things that you're supportive of or the Realtor Association is supportive of?
More condos, trying to get more
Condos?
condos into the area is the good answer. But there's, again, I don't know why the GMA just can't go away, why we have to be one of the first states that are in it. But I don't have a solution for it. I know that I have people that come into town and they're dismayed at what they buy for their price, because there's just not enough homes here to buy.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, we have used up the hour. It seems like it goes pretty fast, but I really appreciate you guys, and Ken, especially on short notice, to join us and have this conversation. I think that these are always good conversations to help, because it helps us, you know, learn together or look for solutions that we can work on together, whether they're legislative, you know, at the local level with our local municipal governments or with the state, or things like that. And I think, Jeff, you did a good job of wrapping around to things that we work a lot here on TriDec with our partners, and that's electricity, access to electricity, transmission, all the things that kind of add up to it. But Melissa, Ken, and Jeff, thanks for joining us today. This has been a really good conversation. We'll have you guys on again, because it's obviously a really critical factor for what we all deal with here in the Tri-Cities, because it has had such a huge effect on our quality of life. So thanks everybody for joining us. Have a good weekend, and we'll be back soon with another webisode, whatever we call these things, of Coffee with Karl. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks for the platform.
You bet.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay.